Hi everyone. So let's integrate our targets into charts using Y42 V3 and Power BI. First off, we're here in V3 in the browser. I've used some mock data provided by Y42, just two very simple models based on car sales. So we have the products, which is basically cars, simple transformation here. And then we have purchases, which is basically it's 100 rows of purchases, and here we have our simple model for those. We have built all of our tables and we're basically ready to go. We have connected Power BI to BigQuery. So we have a couple models ready to go here. One is the purchases here in the middle, right? That's our facts table, and then we have our products dimension table. One thing to note, we also created in Y42 a dim dates table. Of course, always best practice to have a central dates table in Power BI will make a whole lot of things much easier down the road. So we've created that and also loaded it. We have already connected everything. So here it's just very simple and straightforward based on product ID. And then here we have connected a couple of the dates in the purchases table, but really the active one is what we're interested in. It's purchase date, which corresponds to gross revenue, and that's really what we want to look at. So if we look here at the visualization, it's a straightforward table, just a stacked bar chart of the gross revenue. So we have the date hierarchy, sum of price, and then here also the make, details matter. If I hover over something, I would want to see this written correctly. However, probably using the make here, not great. It's so many, so this becomes hard to read. So probably doesn't add that much value, but for now, just let's leave it in. One thing though, if we explore this a bit here and we drill down, or actually let's just use our drill down for all of the data. If you look closely to the x-axis down here, you will actually see that there's lots of stuff missing. And that's because we are just summing the price here based on the purchase date. So if there was no price, no purchase, basically at a particular date in a particular month, then nothing shows up. From an operational perspective, of course, it's very relevant if there was no revenue in a particular month. So we should probably show that. So let's first do that, which is quite straightforward. We just create our metrics table. Best practice here is you just create a dedicated table, which then also Power BI will recognize as such, and that makes things a little bit more neat. So we have that here now, and let's create our measure. We are interested in gross revenue, and what we would just want to do is we basically want to use a coalesce. However, also calculate, there's probably some filter context. So let's use the calculate, and then we just sum the price. And we coalesce this with 0, and this will make sure that even if there wasn't any sale in a particular month, it still will show up. So we save this. And now we can just remove this initial placeholder column, and then you'll see that Power BI, of course, recognizes our metrics table as such. And now if we go back to our visualization, and we are just replacing our gross revenue here, then now you will see all these empty months, which is what we want. However, we go back to years, and that's also the reason why today we will look at yearly targets, which I have entered into our template sheet. So last week I shared this. If you haven't checked it out, you can find the link in the corresponding article here, and you can have this template sheet, which makes it quite easy to integrate targets once you've collected them from your stakeholders. So here I just duplicated this department X tab, which is in template, and named it car sales and entered all these targets here. And now just one simple trick here, if you go onto the pivot table, onto the table I mean, then in table design, then you can change the table name to something that's a bit more meaningful, which comes in handy later. And then once you've done, entered the targets, then you just go to export and you run this query, right? You run the query once here, which will just fetch all of the values from the tabs here. So I've already done this here and we can see it. And now we're basically ready to just integrate that. So again, recommend you to check out my last article on targets and how to integrate them, where I also shared this sheet. Once you've done that, we can just use the very neat Excel integration here in Power BI and just load this workbook up. Alright, so I'm shown everything that's relevant here. I'm interested in the tables, and so the export one is the one I'm interested in. We already see this here, gross revenue. Note though, we have other stuff we don't want. So right now I don't just want to load it, I want to transform it, which of course Power Query makes quite easy. So I can just filter here what I actually want to look at. And it's super straightforward. I just want to see gross revenue right now, and then we just apply this. And now that's it. We already have our targets table in our model. Of course, we still need to, oh, this didn't, yeah. So we still need to properly integrate it though. We have the table right here, export to. We want to rename that to targets. But if we go to our data model now, of course, we still need to connect it to our existing model, which here the straightforward way is to just use the date on the month column here. And here we have a one-to-one relationship. And this is really where these central dimension dates table come really handy. Is you have these tables, and now I'm just going to filter out my targets by this date, but at the same time I'm going to also filter the purchase date, and that is really what makes it work. So we're almost ready to go. Of course, details matter, so we still want to change the target number here to a currency, because this is in euro. We didn't do that in the Excel sheet, so we're just going to do it here. Best practice anyways. Since it's whole numbers, we don't need the decimals, we don't lose any information, so we can just remove them. And now we're basically ready to go. If you have a bar chart, stacked column chart, the easiest way to integrate targets is usually a line. So we can simply choose here in the top row our line and stacked column chart. And now if we go to data, we have this y-axis, and here we can simply add our targets. Here we go. Very nice. All right. Here we have it already. Now, again, we probably want to remove the make because it's not really adding value here. So let's just do that. And details matter. Rename this. Could also play around with the colors, but let's not do that now. We already have a pretty good comparison between actuals and target. One thing that we can still do though, something we haven't seen here yet, is there's actually more dates available, because the date table goes until 2029, end of 2029, so basically 2030, and the measure is based on that table. We can also display targets into the future if we have collected them, right? So I actually enter targets until 2026. So if we apply this here, now we actually have a pretty nice look into the future. If we go even one further, now we have 3 years into the future, right? Now, no actuals yet, but you kind of see where the plan goes to. So sometimes that makes sense to show, sometimes more on the operational side, maybe just the current values. However, one thing, if we now drill down here, right, which usually you want to do, this is what Power BI is good for and what you really want to enable for your stakeholders, but this doesn't really work. So our targets are still just for this first date, yearly, and they're not broken down on a quarterly or monthly basis. Now, there are multiple ways to achieve this. I believe this most straightforward way is to just do it in your transformation layer using SQL. And this is what we're going to do next week. So next week in Y42 V3, we are going to make this work also on a lower level or more granular level using the same targets we just used. So it will be linear breakdown, but still pretty interesting. So tune in next week and let's add context to our charts.